Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing Anomalisa.
Hey, I'm gonna head over to the dealership and I'm gonna lease a new car, you know what I mean?
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting full of loudmouth soap and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form. Some of these drunk synonyms are getting ridiculous, and I love it.
This week we're drinking Space Otter American Pale Ale from the
Mispillion River Brewing.
Mispillion River Brewing. I feel like they really missed an opportunity for Otter Space.
Otter Space. I guess if you read it backwards. But yeah, obviously I picked this because of the name and the fantastic artwork on the front, yeah. Which, as you would expect, is an otter in an astronaut's uniform.
This is not bad. Again, I think all pale ales kind of taste the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's hoppy, but it's bearable, I think, for you. I would hope.
Yeah, it's bearable.
So that's the beer. Now to the movie. Like we said, we're reviewing Anomalisa, which, according to IMDb, thank you yet again, we never have to write another description ever again.
Never again.
Is about a man crippled by the mundanity. Is that how you pronounce that?
Mundanity? I don't know. I'm glad you're reading it, and I'm not.
A man crippled by the mundanity of his life experiences. Oh, I'm reading that wrong. God damn it. A man crippled by the mundanity of his life experiences something out of the ordinary.
There should be some sort of punctuation in there that is not in there. It's not.
I think grammatically it's correct, but it's just life experiences seems like it should go together.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong. They're wrong.
I'm not wrong. The internet wrong. They published it different. Okay. So
it's a very vague description of what happens in this movie.
Yeah. All of this. Some of these IMDb descriptions are not. They're pretty subpar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Step your game up, IMDb.
There's people counting on you.
First, you get the number of Jews wrong. Now these vague ass descriptions.
All right. So now, much like we talked about Aaron Sorkin in the Steve Jobs biopic, and him being the closest thing to a household name as far as screenwriters go, I feel like Charlie Kaufman isn't too far behind.
He's almost ready for a Pitbull reference.
Maybe
and I'll write a script like Charlie Kaufman.
But maybe just like in a different niche, like more independent cult favorite films. Maybe not Pitbull films.
Pitbull probably hasn't seen the Kaufman
the library, yeah. But Kaufman has written Being John Malkovich, Human Nature, Adaptation, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in Synecdoche, New York. And he's only served as a director for the latter. So Anomalisa is officially the second film he's ever directed. Our co-director, which is a term very rarely,
I say to you, this term is rarely used.
Combines very and rarely. You're just saving time, verily. Which is co-director, which is a term that is very rarely used in film. A concept explored in a little film title less than 3. Can't stop plugging it.
YouTube.com/3 short film.
Mr. Worldwide. But anyway, our co-director Duke Johnson has directed an episode of Moral Oral, the Emmy Award-winning Christmas special.
Is it the episode that Charlie Kaufman worked on too? Because he actually...
I actually don't know.
Hold on, I'm going to find that because I was looking that up. He worked on and possibly wrote an episode of Moral Oral. I'd be interested to know if that was a previous collaboration.
I think they are dogs. Because I think they all dogs.
Let's see, Moral Oral, the episode Love from 2006. Are you looking at the Duke Johnson?
I'm not
all
looking
right,
at
no,
it.
I gotta
No.
do that myself.
You
too.
gotta look
I
at
get
that.
it.
Let me.
All right, continue. I will look up.
Okay.
Now that I've sidetracked you, get back on the train of thought. And
Gosh,
continue on your
Mike, you. I mean, well, as long as we're talking about something else, that's not what I'm talking about. Also, I pointed this out. I forgot to even put this in my notes, but this film, it's one of the first things that they credit when showing the production or the studios that put this on.
Not the same episode.
Okay.
Well, everyone was hanging on a whim for that one.
But Starburns Industries pops up, which Starburns very obviously is. I mean, if you're familiar with Community, that is one of the characters, and it's obviously an inside joke that's funny to them, but not so much funny to us. Between Dan Harmon and the guy who actually plays Starburns, I think they started this together. I guess Starburns, the guy, is actually a comedian, and I think he was the creator of Moral Oral, Starburns.
Oh, really?
The guy who plays him, yeah. And
yeah, I guess that is that claymation or moral?
Yeah.
Moral.
Yeah, and that's the same stop motion.
Does he keep the Starburns elsewhere, or
What do you mean?
like in real life, or his sideburns Starburns?
No.
It's less cool now.
Yeah. But so anyway, on top of that, Duke Johnson comes in and directs the Emmy Award-winning Christmas episode of Community. So he's obviously has this connection to them. And then I feel like he brings in Charlie Kaufman, who also wrote for Moral Oral, and they're all like close together. So that's where they ended up shooting this entire film, is in that studio.
At that studio, Starburns, yeah.
And then I think he's also directed a series titled Mary Shelley's Frankenhole, which I can only assume is stop motion animation because I've never seen anything from it. I didn't bother looking at it. But let's talk about Kaufman first. Kaufman almost entirely creates films about male characters who are isolated, and this is certainly no exception. In fact, I think this is the most thematically miserable film he's ever made.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to explain this film to people who aren't familiar with his work because it's such a high concentrated dose of Kaufman.
Well, I guess, Kaufman is definitely known for his use of surrealism in films. Like if you look in like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, that essentially all takes place in Jim Carrey's character's mind as he's trying to forget literally about his ex-girlfriend. Synecdoche, New York is a very like meta film where it's a film about making a film, about making a film, about making a film, and it just takes that to like the nth degree. If you look at Being John Malkovich is literally about finding access to the actor John Malkovich's mind. So he's definitely used a lot of surrealism in his films, and that's apparent in this one. But maybe not as much as his other ones, if I had to gauge it.
Yeah, I guess more the word that comes to mind when you look at Anomalisa is solipsism, which means like the view or theory that self is all that can exist, sort of. And I feel
your
like
reality is the only thing that's real. Yeah.
Right. And so I guess that sort of sets itself apart from a lot of his other films, kind of. But it's also what I was talking about before, where this hones in more on this than anything else he's ever made does. And I feel like going beyond real actors and settings and into animation, I believe Kaufman was able to, achieve the most vivid portrait of that since like Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. Like it's just, I think this is, regardless of how you feel about this film, I think it's important to the history of this theme.
Yeah, it's haunting, and it's kind of just like a bad trip for an entire film,
right?
Like, that one character is experiencing. And I guess we should go into that because the IMDb description doesn't really go into that, but the surrealism in that solipsism basically comes in, and that the main character, Michael Stone, we're introduced to him when he's on a plane to Cleveland, I think is where he's flying.
Cincinnati,
one of those seas. And basically everyone that he encounters has the same voice, literally voiced by the same actor, Tom Newman. So it's, whether it's the pilot on his flight, the person sitting next to him, the flight attendants on the plane, his own wife, his son, his ex-fling, literally everybody in the film is voiced by this Tom Noonan. And it's kind of this thing where you're not sure whether it's just a metaphor for him being bored with everybody or if he is literally actually hearing the same voice from everyone. But at least as far as the audience is concerned, it's all the same guy, Tom Noonan, voicing all these characters. So that's really as far as the surrealism is willing to go in this film.
Yeah, and I think that's well done. I know David. I don't really know any of these people besides Jennifer Jason Leigh, but so David Thewlis voices Michael.
He's if you remember Harry Potter, Professor Lupin.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
right.
And then what else? He's been in a bunch of other stuff. If you see his face, you'll absolutely recognize him. He doesn't look really anything like his voice.
Right.
I'd have to go to his Wikipedia page, but he's been in a ton before.
But then Jennifer Jason Leigh voices Lisa, and Tom Noonan voices literally everyone else in the world. And it's pretty disorienting when you first go into the film. And it's not that he's super monotone. Like, he'll go up and down a semitone to sort of do like a male voice or a child's voice.
But it's not like cartoonish when he does like the female voices. It's still very obviously a male voice, and he'll maybe change the inflection to be more feminine on certain things. And I think his performance, just to jump into that, is pretty good. Just Tom Noonan in terms of playing everybody in the film.
Oh, definitely. And there's something that he uses with his voice that's it's so like mechanic and fake. I kind of like really like that like vibe to it. I don't know. Yeah, he did a really great job with that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Michael's hearing everybody. He's just hearing Tom Noonan's voice.
Yeah, and whether it's actually hearing the same voice or if it's just a metaphor for, like the description says, the mundanity of his life. He's just annoyed by everyone. Like, every conversation seems to either last too long for him, like it's just people talking when he doesn't want to be talked to. Like, the opening scene is a character on the plane kind of holding his hand, saying he gets nervous during plane rides, and Michael Stone, the character, is basically, all right, well, you can let go of my hand now.
Right, yeah.
And then he's in a taxi on his way to the hotel, and the guy just keeps giving him these suggestions for, oh, you should check out the zoo, you should check out Cincinnati chili and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. And it's just very obvious he just wants to be left alone. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. Even when he's at the hotel checking in, the clerk is taking too long and asking him all these questions. The bellhop who's carrying his luggage up to his room keeps talking to him, and he doesn't want to hear from anyone anymore. And that's very apparent throughout the entire intro to the film.
But just like what you were saying, Michael's problem is obviously a psychological extreme, but like so many of his other films, I feel I'm leaning more towards it serves as a metaphor for something more universal. This broader phenomenon, I think, is like rationalizing lack of empathy is kind of what I saw as the metaphor.
An ability to connect. And
and I know that's rationalizing lack of empathy is kind of just a jumble of words, but I feel like this struck me in the same way that like Edward Scissorhands, the way that film struck me, because like, you know, like Tim Burton created Edward Scissorhands as a metaphor for why Tim Horton, like, you know, like why maybe he like emotionally hurts people in real life. You know, he can't help that, you know, like he was born with scissors for hands, you know, it's just,
Tim Burton was, yeah.
He
actually has real scissors for hands.
I mean, but you know what I mean, but,
which is amazing that he was able to direct a film.
Yeah, he was.
Right after
he cuts all the film himself. He's in the editing room with his
no, I got this. Yeah. Allow me. Wow. But I guess we should say that really the turning point is, they establish for a while that he's just annoyed by everyone. He even calls up when he's in the hotel room. He calls his wife. His wife's got the same voice. His son's got the same voice. He shows a very obvious lack of interest in hearing from either of them. It's just kind of a routine, courtesy call. And then he looks up in the phone book a past fling of his and calls.
Right.
And that person is voiced by the same Tom Noonan. And he's able to convince this past fling, I can't remember her name now, Deborah or something like that, to basically meet up with him again at the hotel. Just as a side note, I thought Tom Noonan's performance as that character was particularly good.
Yeah.
Just especially on the phone, like the way she's like, "Oh, this is a lot. This is a
Right,
lot."
yeah,
Michael,
yeah,
like this
exactly.
is overwhelming. Like I'm shaking right now. I don't know what to do. And I thought the writing was pretty good in that part of the scene. So then they meet up. It doesn't really go so well because Michael kind of right out of the gate basically suggests that they should sleep together. And,
Right.
Not so many words. That doesn't go over so well. She leaves. And he goes back to his room. I guess he takes a shower, and the film basically turns when, after coming out of the shower, his face starts to fall off. And he hears a different voice for once in his head. And in a panic, he kind of throws his clothes on, runs out of the room, and is basically banging on every room in the hotel until he can find who has this different voice that is not Tom Noonan.
Right.
And when he does find it, it's this girl named Lisa who happens to be taking a shower in the same room and as her friends. They actually happen to know who Michael Stone is because they're there
To see him
in
speak.
Cincinnati for the conference that he's about to speak at about customer service. Which is a very weird thing to be a fan girl of a customer service book that he wrote.
Right.
But that's essentially where the film turns, is he's found this girl who has a different voice, whatever that's a metaphor or whether it's just literally her voice is different, and he's kind of just obsessed from that point on. I thought it gave up some pretty creepy vibes from that on.
Definitely.
I mean,
Do you want
because
to elaborate?
Well, it's because, all right, so he's an older man. He's graying, so he's obviously 50s or older. He's very well established in his life, and we
I don't know if I'd call him 50s for like the age that his child is, but I mean maybe.
Yeah, I mean at the very youngest, late 40s, obviously much older than this Lisa character, I think, at least from what is expressed.
Okay.
Not that she's a
Right.
teenager, but
Right.
and she's, I think, mentally much younger. But we'll get into
Oh,
that.
definitely. Right.
He's someone in kind of a position of authority. He is somewhat famous and well successful, even if he doesn't, admit it to himself. With this book, he's made money. He can afford this really nice hotel. Because her and her friend Lisa, I forget what her friend's name. They even say oh, we splurged on
They
this
splurged
because
to get
this is
this.
a vacation.
And this is just like a regular thing.
It's
for
got
him.
turn down service. We didn't know that was even a thing. But she's obviously, as we come to find out later, she's much less experienced in terms of just social interaction and dating and sex, as we find out later.
As opposed to her friend who is a huge flirt and perpetually coming on to Michael.
And she's not necessarily shy, but she's awkward and she doesn't know how to act. And she's
Right.
always blurting things out and then saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that," or "Oh, you must think this of me," or "Oh, you must think that was really dumb."
Right.
She's very impressionable and, willing to change things about herself just based on suggestion. And she's lacking confidence, mainly due to the scar that she happens to have on her face. I don't think they actually go into where that scar came
They
from.
don't. She says, I'd rather not talk about it.
But
Which there's no need to.
all of these reasons where it comes off that even though, there is this kind of genuine thing where it's the one voice that he is different from everyone else in the world, but he's also very clearly just taking advantage of this woman in a very strange way. He keeps telling her things like, "Oh, just keep talking, talk to me," or sing to me. And he's able to get her alone and away from her friend at one point, bring her back to the room. And that's when it just gets even more creepy with just talk
Right.
to me and sing to me and
Right.
just stuff like that.
But it almost seems like the appropriate back and forth between somebody who thinks he's the only person kind of existing in his world and somebody who is wildly immature for their age and somebody who has the only relationship they've ever been is with an older fat man in the office who already has a family, but only pays attention to her because he thinks that she'll put
Has
out
a chance, yeah.
Right. So she's definitely emotionally stunted. And Michael one of my complaints with his character is that he is so established and he has this enormous power, but I feel like that also represents sort of like the power that's within his own mind over other things that are happening, sort of like.
But it's this thing where like that's where I start to think that maybe it's not necessarily as much a metaphor. Because it's very obvious in the interactions that they have with each other that they don't really have an actual connection.
Right.
Like this is her latching on to someone that she's been fantasizing about in her head just because of his fame and his power. And there's nothing that they really have in common. You can even tell he almost has this sort of disinterest in her, besides the fact that her voice is different.
Right.
And he doesn't care what she talks about. He doesn't care what she says, just as long as she's talking, or just as long as she's like singing. There's that really awkward scene where she sings the
oh my gosh,
girls just want to have
I wrote
fun
about
song.
that. There is this scene where Lisa sings. She talks about like Cyndi Lauper and like how much she loves her, and she's like, I love like the song, like girls just want to have fun. And after much convincing, Michael, and I thought this was just going to be a more like cringeworthy, embarrassing scene. Like there is a lot when
I was cringing and I was embarrassed
when they're talking next to each other, or just more humorous. I guess I thought for the Lisa character, but it's just I think that was one of my favorite scenes because it had it's such a goofy song. Like my girlfriend Sabri listens to it all the time. She puts it on like a playlist with like all of this modern music. I'm like, why are you listening to like this is such a dummy song? Like just like it's Cyndi Lauper and it's just like like come on girls. But then she sings and I wrote down the lyrics here. Some boys take or this is like the part that she writes, or this is the part that she decides to sing, which is weird because it's kind of in the middle of the song. It says, some boys take a beautiful girl and hide her away from the rest of the world. I want to be the one that walks in the sun. And then she like repeats that. She's like, I want to be the one that walks in the sun. And it's so like weird and feel bad and like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is good writing because it's very telling for the characters. But I think my problem is that I was so like disturbed by these characters because it's the performance. It's obviously it's a cappella. It's just like off the cuff. It's obviously not a beautiful performance. It's not even really a beautiful song to sing. Yeah. It's a fun song, and whatnot. But it's not something that you would hear. Oh, that's beautiful, Cyndi Lauper. Like,
No, exactly.
It was just like a pop song from that time, and she happens to pick this song to sing, and she's singing it, and he is entranced sort of by it. But it's not about the fact that it's not about the lyrics. It's not about how beautiful he thinks or doesn't think the song is. It's just that this is a different voice than he's heard before. Right. And that's kind of their entire relationship is just that he doesn't care what the hell she's saying. It's not about that. It's not about what she looks like. It's just the fact that it's a different voice. And that's where I think that it's not necessarily as much a metaphor as it is just literally living in the real reality of that surrealism that Charlie Kaufman has created, and that literally he's hearing the same voice everywhere, and he does happen to hear a new voice, and he just wants to get away from that. Right. Because I think if it had been a metaphor, they would have had some kind of connection in their conversation that they were able to relate to, rather than him just saying, talk.
Right.
That's nice. You have a beautiful voice. Talk. Sing. That's nice. That's a beautiful voice. Like,
right.
There's nothing really relationship wise for them to connect on. And I guess they do come around to that later when that relationship kind of, meets its conclusion later in the film. But I just ultimately found that creepy and pretty disturbing. And
right.
I feel like in his other films, his surrealism has served where there's like a deeper truth that you're able to find in this weird stuff that's going on. You know, like the tortured artist in Synecdoche, New York, or, trying to get over someone literally by deleting their memory in Eternal Sunshine, or the writing process and adaptation. Whereas in this one, I feel like there wasn't a lot to relate to because it gave into that surrealism, right? And it didn't really give you like how are we supposed to relate to like completely just using someone for like their voice,
And then from there, there is sex.
Animated sex.
There's
I guess we should also probably talk about the quality of the animation, which is good and is probably one of the positives of the film is.
Yeah. And I keep saying, and I have some bullet points in my notes. I keep saying stop motion which I guess the film uses, but I believe there's a specific type of animation that this film uses, and it's called replacement animation, which is how they animate the face with a bunch of different top halves and like bottom halves.
Yeah, and you can see that they kind of look
face.
like dolls, and they're
Right.
split basically above the eyes so that the eyes can give expressions, whatnot.
Right, and I think the only thing I know for sure that I've seen it used before is like Coraline. However, playing off this like replacement animation, most of the time I like for Coraline and for other films that they've used this in, I think they always paint out the seams in post production, and I kind of don't like how they didn't choose to do that in this film. It was kind of distracting to look at.
They did also. They have the scene like we referenced before, where his face, like the
Right.
bottom half, literally falls off.
All right.
And that's again where it was kind of like you were conscious of the fact that he is kind of like a doll the entire
Right.
time, and that's the only scene where it kind of like slips out. And I think I might have appreciated it more if it was consistent throughout the fact that he was a doll,
Right.
I guess, and if it came up or that his face had the ability to kind of split. Like there was, I mean, you can literally see like robot insides when like his face comes off during that one scene, and that's not a dream sequence like that because there is. We'll get into that later. There is a dream sequence that I didn't really appreciate too much, but this is during like the real life sequence of the movie.
But yeah, I kind of wasn't expecting that, and there's a difference between. I watched the trailer several times. The trailer for this film is beautiful, but I guess just on a small screen, I kind of just like thought the characters were wearing glasses or something. And then when I got in there and I saw like the side of their face have like a long like slit along it, I was like, oh, okay,
Ooh, they all have that.
Yeah, it's, all right.
I mean, I guess maybe that robot face scene is just them kind of like trying to patch up the fact that you're going to see that, throughout. But I didn't think it really added at all as much as just being kind of an inadequate Band-Aid
Right.
for that. Going back to that dream sequence,
Right.
and also just going back to how I feel like Charlie Kaufman, he uses this surrealism to, kind of tell these deeper truths, or even if it's not so much a deeper truth, he'll kind of just go like really overboard with the surrealism just to make you feel something in terms of either feeling uncomfortable or feeling overwhelmed by things that are like out of this reality. But in this, he kind of takes like the cheap way out, where after Michael Stone and the character Lisa have had sex the one night, he wakes up the next morning to a call from the hotel manager, and the hotel manager is like, "Oh, there's been a problem. Can you come down and see me in my office in the basement?" So Michael gets dressed. He goes down there, and the basement office is just weird to begin with. It's like this not really great looking concrete office. There's a strange hole. It's got this bigger than life reality where he has to like get on a golf cart and literally drive over to the guy's desk in the back corner of the room. They have this really awkward conversation, and then the hotel manager essentially confesses that he's in love with Michael without having meeting him before, and then eventually expresses that everybody actually loves Michael and that he can have anybody he wants just as long as it's not Lisa.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't crazy about, because then it just became like so transparent, like the metaphor of like how, because I think the entire film as a whole is basically about how it's really hard to stay in love with someone, and that everything is sort of passing in some way, and that it's really hard to maintain a relationship. And I think the entirety of the film is about that, and how he's feeling these things for Lisa, but he knows that eventually it's going to pass and something is going to ruin it at some point. And this is kind of just like a really broad-headed, over-the-top way of saying like, oh yeah, like you can have literally anybody else in the world except for Lisa. And then he's running around the room, or runs back to the room. He grabs Lisa. I think she went back to her friend's room in his dream, and he picks her out of the room, drags her back to his room. He's like, oh, we got to run. We got to get out of the way. And then he wakes up, and the entire thing was a dream. And that was like the most surrealist that I feel like the film actually went, in terms of having everyone literally be in love with him, having the hotel manager who he's never met come out with this expression of love. And then he kind of just abandons that surrealism to go, oh, it was all just a dream. Now we're actually just going to go back to this other reality that is still surrealist, but not that surrealist. And I felt like that was kind of a cop-out on what was probably one of the better parts of the film in my mind, just because it...
Did you want that to be
I just liked how it was. It felt more Charlie Kaufman, and I just liked. I've always liked how he bends reality and how you're kind of just forced to accept that. All right, this is the reality in this universe. And it was kind of like in this, there's like two different levels where there's the semi-surrealism of everyone kind of has the same voice. And then he takes it to the extreme in the dream, whereas, everyone's actually in love with him. And, this kind of, as much as I wasn't crazy about that metaphor, I appreciated how much it was bending reality in that. And especially just like the visuals. Like everything else feels visually real.
Right.
Where his other films have had these crazy visual scenes. And this was the only really scene that had that in terms of having to drive all the way to the other end of the room on like a golf cart. Like obviously that's not a real thing for a hotel manager's desk. That's just a reality that we're forced to accept. But then he just completely abandons it with a dream. And it felt cheap. It didn't really feel like Kaufman, who usually will stick with a bold surrealist choice rather than, I mean, that's always kind of a cop-out in a film. Just, it was just a dream. Right. He wasn't actually in danger at that time. It was just a dream.
I don't know. I kind of liked it. I don't know how to explain it necessarily. Besides that, I think it was inappropriate for what was coming in the actual reality as opposed to the dream. Yeah, it ends
up being a device for that.
And I think it was a way to sort of tell what was going on inside of his mind at a very high level, as opposed to the high level that was already going on in reality, where he's hearing all these people's voices, but now people actually speaking out to him. Like, I love like the scene where he's running across the desk and the women are like, "I'll fuck you," that kind of thing. Like, and like it's like such a dreamy, and it's super dreamlike, honestly, because like things like that happen in dream, like things like rooms are larger than they are like in dreams and everything. Whereas what was happening in the actual, still surreal reality, everybody having the same voice and just going about your time and ordering room service and everything was sort of mundane life. But the dream took it to like a whole new, I don't know, if that was a part of the film and it wasn't a dream, I would totally be lost, I think. I kind of almost got the vibe.
Well, yeah, obviously you would have to change some things to blend that into the story. Right. I didn't like, because that was the first time where I got excited and I was like, all right, this is the Charlie Kaufman that I've been like looking for this entire film, where it's been like Charlie Kaufman light the entire rest of the film.
Right.
And then it's immediately ripped away. They do kind of come back to it later, just to move sort of onward with the plot, is that ends up being a device where right after he like kind of wakes up to kind of prove to himself that this is different, that his love with Lisa is going to last and be forever, he basically says, do you want, I don't think he actually asked her to marry him, but he says, do you want to be with me forever?
I want to leave my wife.
Yeah, I want to leave my life. We should be together forever, essentially. And of course, she's so impressionable. She says yes. And they start basically talking about the arrangements. And then sure enough, as they're having breakfast and they're talking about, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do with the rest of our life? Her voice starts morphing into Tom Noonan's as he's, noticing quirks about her, eating with her mouth open. Or at one point she tells him not to do something and he says, that's awful controlling. And then her voice morphs even more. And I felt like that was just not necessarily predictable, but I was not crazy about that turn.
I see. I really like that. And I don't know, maybe it's because I wasn't able to predict it, but I talked to, I think Kevin said, and he's like, oh, that was too predictable. But like I didn't think that was predictable at all for me. And maybe they do. They leave all these sort of breadcrumbs about like, well, like how did he like fall in love with his wife, or how did he have like that fling with that other woman? And I feel like the way that it starts to make sense through her voice turning back, you're like, oh shit, like it's a pattern, like
yeah,
it's, I don't know.
But I guess that's also what I didn't like about it. And then after that, he's basically like, all right, well, we'll do all that, whatever, after whatever, I'm going to go speak at my conference.
Right.
This is where I completely was turned off to the film, is what happens at the conference.
Okay.
Because it's not even necessarily surrealism, because it's still essentially in his like real reality, but his behavior is just so bizarre, and I couldn't even really find a metaphor to really tie it to. It wasn't necessarily even really funny or really making a point. It was, he was just having a complete meltdown in a way that nobody would really have one, but it wasn't far enough to the extreme where it really felt really surreal in a Charlie Kaufman sense. And I don't know. At that point, I was completely decided that I was not really going to enjoy the latter half of this movie. I don't know how you felt about that conference scene, but that was
liked it. I thought it was, again, it was a meltdown. It was sort of, I mean, like, I feel like all of a sudden his mantra or what he had been making a living off of it, or his career, was kind of turning against him, and the irony was kind of starting to like curdle his soul almost, you know. And it was happening right there on stage, and especially he's on stage in front of the woman that he just thought he was going to spend the rest of his life with, and just kind of looking at that and being like, how could I be so stupid? I can't tell the difference between anybody. I can't empathize with anybody because everybody has this same voice. And essentially, instead of physically falling apart like he did once or twice, like in front of the bathroom mirror, which is, you know, like, obviously that's surreal, but it's something that you can feel about yourself. But here it was happening on stage in front of these people, in front of the woman he just slept with, and meant completely nothing. So I understood that scene. Or I enjoyed that scene. I know what you mean, though. I guess it went on a little long.
Well, then, I mean, there was even parts where, like, this is another, not necessarily criticism, but just an observance, is that the animation style is pretty slow throughout the rest of it. Like, no one really has any sudden movements. Even when he's, like, freaking out to, like, get his pants on in one scene, like, it's kind of like a slow falling to the ground as he's, like, putting the pants on. But then during that scene, there's one part in particular that really sticks out where he starts doing, like, the Nazi Germany salute. And it's, like, really, really fast and almost, like, trying to be fast for, like, comedic effect. I don't know if you remember that scene where he's literally...
I do remember that.
Yeah, he does the Nazi salute and he's just like walking back and forth across the stage, and it's faster than anything that has shown up in the animation style beforehand, and it pulls you out of it, pulled me out of it at least. And
I didn't notice that.
It felt like it was trying to be funny about, not that it didn't seem like it should have been a funny scene. I would have preferred a more serious meltdown, something that I could, you know, actually grasp onto, rather than something that I couldn't really see anyone ever really doing ever. Obviously, we've already suspended our disbelief about the fact that he's hearing the same voices everywhere. But that works better as a metaphor if there's other parts of reality that we can ground ourselves in. And this just felt like I can't imagine anyone melting down in that kind of way during a speech to that degree. And that's where I was just kind of pulled out of the film, pulled out of the immersion, and kind of turned off to the film in general at that point. But then moving on from there, after the conference, he basically flies back home without essentially a word to Lisa at all, abandons her completely, and he goes back to his wife and is just completely miserable. And then was it a letter that Lisa... Did she mail it to him? I can't remember looking back on it now. Did she mail it to him, or was it left in his hotel room? At some point there, or is it just we're hearing her writing the letter in the car? Because there is a letter at the end of the film. I just can't remember if he received it or how. You know what I'm talking about?
I thought he or she was writing it in the car or something.
Okay, so he hasn't actually gotten a letter. Either way, she's writing him a letter as they're driving away from the conference, and it kind of tends to mimic. I don't think we talked about this yet, but when he in the very opening scene on the plane, he's reading this letter
from his wife.
No, it's from his past fling. I think it's not his wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
yeah, it's the one. It's the person that he calls when he
exactly.
It's Cincinnati. But it's essentially kind of like, you know, why did you leave me? Like, I thought we were so good. Blah blah blah.
Right.
And this letter sort of mimics that, just in terms of being a letter that has come from out of this pattern that we've learned that he has, in terms of just, you know, finding someone that he can attach to, being very, very passionate about them for a short period of time, and then turning, you know, quickly in a way that he can't even explain, and just basically dipping. And essentially we realize that this is his pattern, and then the film just kind of ends right there. And I think that's probably where my biggest complaint is, just that there's literally zero character development with this character. We're basically just given one glimpse at a very short example of this pattern that he's had his entire life, in terms of, you know, finding a woman, feeling very strongly about her, whether it's the metaphor of her being a connection or the actual just her having a different voice. And then her voice morphs back and he abandons her. And it just, I felt like I didn't know why I had to watch that amount of film to hear. I feel like it would have worked better as a short film where you don't expect as much character development, but there was literally no character development in this film.
I agree. I think it definitely almost had the plot of a short film. That's definitely what I
think it would have
thought.
made a fantastic short film. And that's like there are things that I really loved about this film. But it's almost like it was trying to do too much by being a feature-length film.
Right.
And it's like it was like taking a big risk, and because it took that big risk, it failed hugely in a way. Where I think if it had been a short film, the things that I did like about it as a feature film, I would have really liked about it as a short film, and probably would have given it a very positive rating. But my overall experience, if you couldn't tell already, was pretty negative with this film.
I think it was just under an hour and a half, so it wasn't long at all. Especially as far as feature
and as far
films.
as animated films go too.
Right, and as far as animated films go, there are some scenes that we passed a while ago, but that I just want to dip back to. Scenes that I specifically liked about this. It's just the sex scene, which I feel like we skipped right over.
Yeah, no, that was very well animated.
Yeah, and I just thought it was like a lot of things in this film. It was just bizarre to see animation, even though
it reminded me of Team America.
Right? No, and that's what I was about to say. This is a super realistic sex scene, like especially when she's laying down. On her back.
Even just like cunnilingus in general is pretty far-fetched.
But even when she's just laying down, like looking up and like talking out loud, and he just like kisses her on the cheek like 15 times, like kind of like that very real, like mimics like real life. If there was like this older man and younger woman kind of, and he's just continuously trying to get her
not listening and
into the mood. I just think it's one of the most realistic live action, or like even more realistic than any sort of live action sex scene that I've seen. Through that. And then there's, again, like you just said, there's the cunnilingus scene, which is longer than them actually having sex, I feel like. And then, I don't know, within this sex scene, I also feel like there's a huge amount of very character-telling details through the sex scene, almost more than any other during the film. The sex scene, again, it was a super bold choice, but I feel like it paid off immensely, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that's one of the positives is the sex scene.
And like you said, in a world where Team America, World Police exist, they were able to make a puppet sex scene that was just literally like...
It felt realer than some live action sex scene.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, these are two people experiencing joy and pleasure in a way that they haven't ever been able to have before. And I feel like that's like what sex is, kind of. And I feel like that accurately represented it. What?
I said if you're lucky.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. There was, again, just circling back to just other things. Michael stays in the Fragoli Hotel, which I looked up, and there's something called the Fragoli delusion, which is a condition in which someone believes that everyone around them is the same person in disguise. And I think this condition's actually brought on traumatically or organically, I guess, like born like that. But I don't think Kaufman intended for Michael to have this condition as much as, like, I felt like it was kind of just more of a metaphor.
Does that come from the Fragoli Hotel, or is the Fragoli just coincidentally the same name as that condition?
I think the hotel was made... I don't think the Fragoli Hotel is a real hotel. I think it's a Kaufman invented name. And I think Fragoli was actually like an Italian like clown or something in like the something hundreds who could change on stage without people really knowing that it wasn't a different person and that it was the same person. Like, so it all comes from just, I'm sure he was looking up different delusions or something.
And that's the thing, though. Like, I mean, he's obviously such a fantastic writer, like one of the best writers of our generation, like by far, and especially when it comes to surrealism. And I think that's why it pains me so much to find that there wasn't any character development towards the end of it. And it kind of felt like this thin plot where it's a cool idea, and I can see why he was drawn to it. But I wish he would have either made it a short film or expanded on it and added more to it, because it in the end, it is kind of a simple idea. Just
right.
Especially when compared to his other films, like, the scope of like Synecdoche, New York, or, this huge metaphor in Eternal Sunshine of trying to get over, past love, and just the other things that he explores in his other films. It felt like this was just an idea that he was like, well, we could animate this. And it felt like the animation was his way of like adding surrealism to it. But the animation is so good that it doesn't. If that makes sense. Like, if the animation had been worse or like more jarring, maybe it would have worked in order making the film more unique. But the animation is so good that like it doesn't really pull you out of the experience, maybe like he was wishing it would, and like he tries to in his other films. And you're kind of just super focused in on the story because you're so immersed by the animation that you get to see the inconsistencies in the story and what's lacking, as far as I'm concerned, in the character development and the plot and whatnot.
I feel like this, I read this somewhere in an interview or two. I think Jordan also said something about it, that it was originally staged as a radio play, which makes a lot more sense.
With the voice, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Because he had like very little budget. I know this film had an incredibly small budget. I mean, he was writing it for a small budget for like a staged radio play. But it did make sense that it felt like an adaptation of something else. It didn't feel like this was originally supposed to be some sort of animation. And I think through a lot of parts, it does show that sort of.
And I thought, the dialogue is great. Like, obviously, Kaufman excels at dialogue and whatnot, but I just felt like it just didn't really serve a purpose. Like, yeah, you can write dialogue about like two guys, peeing at a urinal, but does that really mean anything? And is there anything that we're really learning from that? And that's kind of how I felt about this, is that like, yeah, there's a concept there. Yeah, the dialogue is great. Yeah, you've created some unique characters, but overall, all I'm really left with is there's a creepy guy that is unhappy with his life. And at the end of the film, he's still unhappy with his life and nothing's really changed.
Right.
So I think that's where my negative experience with the film comes from. And I think maybe if someone else had written it, maybe I'd give it a little bit more leeway, but because it's Charlie Kaufman and I know that he's capable of such more, much more than this. And, we've seen, some of the best films of our generation come out of his mind and his imagination. And I feel like he took a risk with this film in terms of, making it animated and with this concept. And when Charlie Kaufman takes a risk, when it works, it pays off.
Right.
And when it doesn't work, it hurts the film a lot. I think if it had been anyone else, it probably might not have hurt the film as much.
Right.
But when it's Charlie Kaufman writing it, I think you have to hold him to a higher standard, and just the things that he tries that didn't work in this film, I think, hurt it more than the things that he tried that did work help it.
Okay. Yeah, no. Yeah, I understand that. So you wanna show some fingers?
One finger.
Really? Oh, okay. That was so sudden. I was like,
I feel like I already kind of led up to it with that past paragraph. Kaufman is a phenomenal writer, and I feel like he was kind of doing himself a disservice with this. He didn't really live up to the parts of Kaufman that have made him great, and he didn't really explore new territories that, were showing Kaufman in a new light either. It was kind of just like Kaufman light throughout the entire thing. And I think he felt that maybe the animation was going to make up for that. Like, that was the other unique thing about the film that people were going to pay attention to. Right. And the animation is good, but like I said, it's so good that you focus on the writing because you don't care that it's animated. You're just caring about these characters, and the characters are pretty thin, and they don't really explore anything and go anywhere that really helped me learn any kind of truth about myself or that I could really feel like I could relate to. It just felt like a creepy guy that stayed a creepy guy. And I felt like it was so close to being a good film. Like, it's not like it completely missed them. Like, it was so close to being on the mark that it hurt the film.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does.
If they had some weird outlandish concept, I might have given it a better score. But it's like it was so close to what could have been in my mind a really phenomenal film, and what drew me to seeing it in the trailer and whatnot, and drew a lot of people to seeing it but because it missed and being so close to the mark, I feel like it hurt it more than having a shitty concept might have hurt it.
Right. No, definitely.
So yeah, 1 out of 5 stars.
Man.
Sorry, I had a negative experience seeing this.
Oh no, it's fine. I mean, again, that's why there's 2 of us. So now I feel like you're gonna hate my score because I give it 4 fingers.
Wow.
Yeah. So polar opposites.
I mean, I was kind of expecting. I knew that you had a positive experience going into this.
I did, and here's the thing: is that I went in and I saw the trailer. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but trailer. I mean, I know a lot of people who don't like to watch trailers before they go to films, whatever. I think trailers are an art form of themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just, I love them. I could watch trailers more than I could watch movies in like certain moods, kind of. And I really love this trailer, and I was initially very disappointed in this film. Mm-hmm. It was nothing like the trailer, and I thought it was going to be a lot more grandiose, and I thought it was gonna, cover this sprawling emotional landscape, and so I initially left the theater disappointed. And I don't know where my finger meter laid at this point, but I think it really kind of started to dig into me. I think I'm kind of just going with this as it goes. I think it had a lot of like super important themes. I think maybe I even judged it on a different rating scale than you, because I feel like I didn't consider this completely a Charlie Kaufman film. I kind of just took this as a Charlie Kaufman screenplay and a Duke Johnson kind of directorial debut. That's kind of more what I saw it as. But because I think Charlie Kaufman could sell more stuff, and I think he was just happy his like radio play script was being used. I don't know. But that's kind of like the scale that I was judging it on. But I think this had some tremendous themes. This solipsism. I think it's stand out thematically. I think if you want to point, I think this will be referenced a lot in the future. If you want to point to certain themes about Kafka or any sort of just exploring the loneliness of like being alive, sort of, and also. The film really hit me hard with when the Lisa character started to turn into the Tom Noonan voice. I think that might have been like the saddest thing for me in any film that I've watched this year. Just because, I don't know, it is just such a big theme of just like nothing lasts forever, kind of.
Right.
And it's just this futile sort of effort that we all make to find enjoyment.
Did you feel bad for Michael in that scene, or did you feel bad for Lisa?
Michael.
Really?
Yes. I don't.
In that scene, because I felt like the things she was doing were not that crazy, and it was just more indicative of, to me at least, of Michael just being someone who can just never be satisfied.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad writing.
But maybe I identified with somebody who can't be satisfied, or something like that.
And that's the thing that I think is really interesting, is that I think we agree on a lot of the points about this movie.
Right.
But
we
like
see ourselves in different characters?
No, because I felt like I could relate to some things about this, but it just felt like it was so close to being a really phenomenal film in my mind.
Definitely.
But the few things that it missed were so able to sway my opinion in the other direction.
Right.
I think his treatment of like that was a scene, especially the placement in the film. Like if that had been earlier in the film, and then there's another relationship after that we're able to explore another pattern where he's learned his lesson.
I don't
and
think
something
so.
happens differently. I think I might have felt differently, but because it's this short example of pattern, and it's not even like, it doesn't even seem like something that would be that significant, especially compared to like the whatever Deborah or whoever his first fling is, that obviously has left an impact on him over like a decade or so. I think it's 95 or 2005 or something, that it's some kind of 5 year, because I think it's literally been 10 years since this experience has happened. I think if it had been something like that, it might have been different, but it happens towards the end of the film, where you're waiting for his character to take a turn. Or at least I was, where I was expecting a change. I was hoping for a change. It didn't even necessarily have to be a happy ending, but I was hoping for him to learn something about something, because I think that's what the audience needs in terms of just, story arc and plot, is the character to need something, to either get it or not get it. And he doesn't get it, but there's nothing that he learns from the experience of not getting it. And I think that's probably what I hated most about the film.
But I think that's kind of what I like, the futility of life and relationships and everything.
No, and that's what I'm saying, is that I see what you're seeing there, but I was looking for something completely different.
Right.
Like, I think we saw the same film. Right, and I think it's not like I was like had my eyes blinded during certain parts. It's not like you had like tunnel vision during certain parts. We saw the same exact film. Mm-hmm. Me personally, going into this film, maybe just because of my expectations of Charlie Kaufman, I was looking for certain things, and those things weren't satisfied. And there were small things. The other things were satisfied. Visually, it's a great film throughout.
Right.
The writing is still, in terms of dialogue and character, not necessarily development, but character, just establishing characters. The characters are great.
Right.
They just don't go anywhere, and they just kind of stay where they are the entire time.
But I feel like them not going anywhere and they're not being
I get that it's the point of the film. That's where I say it should have been a short film. I felt like I didn't need to sit through an hour and a half or less than that of the film not going anywhere for what's essentially a 2-day relationship that's not going to mean that much to him later on.
But I also feel like Anomalisa, it kind of almost sounds like some sort of love story. And again, she's like this fucking voice that like cuts through everything. And I feel like they lead you to believe that this is some sort of love story. But again, at the end, it is nothing. And life is this futile sort of effort. And I feel like, now I don't know where I was going with that, but I feel like that is, like I said, like around the beginning, I feel like that is the highest concentrate of Kaufman, is that he doesn't need to lend himself to some sort of like Hollywood, well, there's a lesson at the end of each, there's a light at the end of each tunnel.
It's not even that I wanted it to be some like Hollywood-esque lesson of like, well, now I know that I've got to pay more attention to who people are, as individuals. I wanted him to grow in some way, even if it was in a negative way. Mm-hmm. It just felt like he was just literally
I think he grew in a negative way, but I think it's going to wear off and it's going to happen again, like X amount of years down the road, and he's going to keep like living this life that like maybe you think something's in front of you, but then you kind of just fall back down off a ledge, and you're like, oh, you're going uphill, and you kind of just fall back down off a ledge. Mm-hmm. So I think it is. I think the loop that you fall into with this film is the sort of development,
I guess. But again, I think it would have been a phenomenal short film. I think that's a strong enough concept for a short film. I just don't think that's strong enough for an hour and a half feature-length film.
Right.
It's just not enough development for me. I was so disappointed when the credits started rolling. I was like, no, there has to be like something else after this. Like, he can't just end it here.
Right.
It almost felt like it was just like, oh God, I'm tired of animating these characters. Like, let's just end the film here. We're out of puppets. It felt like it ended way too early in terms of progression because it never went anywhere.
Right.
But again, like I'm saying, like we saw a lot of the same things in the film, and there was things that I appreciated, but they're completely overshadowed by the things that he missed, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely.
And that's why we have a 1 and a 4. So to sort of wrap this up, let's maybe figure out what that is, because I actually can't do that math in my head. Actually, I can. But
I think it's 2.5. 2.5, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So, we've come to the conclusion for Anomalisa at a 2.5 finger
2.5 fingers
rating. And, well, we, like Mike said at the end of the last episode, he said we really need to start writing some sort of sign off.
And we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't. And we're just doing this episode now. So, signing off for How Many Fingers, my name is Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And, well, that's the end of the podcast, I guess.
And puppets are better at sex than we are.
And you didn't learn anything from this. It's just life is futile.